After breaking up with my boyfriend, I secretly went abroad to study alone, carrying a deeply wounded heart, without telling anyone. Over the 5 years, I changed my name and phone number, completely severing all ties with my life back home. Everyone believed I was dead on the day my boyfriend secretly married my stepsister. For the entire 5 years, the red roses placed in mourning before my grave never ceased for a single day. 5 years later, I returned to the country to relocate my mother's grave, and my ex-boyfriend Ryan once again came with red roses to pay his respects to me. After a moment of shock and awkwardness, I still greeted him, "Long time no see." He tugged at the corner of his mouth and hid the roses behind his back. "Long time no see, I thought, you were dead." I smiled, pretending not to notice his reddening eyes. He was not wrong. Claire was indeed dead 5 years ago on the day he secretly married my father's illegitimate daughter behind my back. When I returned to relocate my mother's grave, I discovered an additional tomb next to it, belonging to me. It was inscribed, "Beloved wife Claire." In front of the tomb were a bouquet of roses, a peace talisman, and my once favorite chocolate cake. The staff followed my gaze and looked over, somewhat surprised. "Miss Claire, look at the photo on the tombstone, doesn't it resemble you? If I didn't know you just returned from abroad, I'd think it was haunted." I smiled. "It does look similar, but it's not me. My name is Claire, a top contributor to the French MT magazine and the sole heiress of the Ching Group. I just celebrated my 3rd wedding anniversary with my husband, and our child is 2 years old, a true winner in life. The person on the tombstone is named Claire. 5 years ago, because the stepsister brought home by her father was diagnosed with depression, her father and brother secretly held a wedding for the stepsister behind her back. The groom was her childhood sweetheart boyfriend of 8 years. She was an utter failure. She and I are no longer the same person." Retracting my gaze, I turned my head to discuss the grave relocation with the staff. Unexpectedly, a familiar voice came from behind, "Claire." I ignored it and continued talking with the staff. Suddenly, a strong force grabbed my arm. Under the staff's surprised gaze, I stumbled and turned to meet Ryan's eyes. "Claire, you're actually not dead?" A cold smile curled at the corner of my mouth, but my eyes fell on the red roses in the man's hand. 5 years without seeing him. How had Ryan's eyes become as red as the roses? I dismissed the staff and stood firm in front of my tombstone. Ryan followed behind me, throwing the red roses in his hand to the ground, his voice revealing anger from being deceived. "Claire, you're quite good at pretending. These 5 years, watching me live in guilt every day, must have made you very happy, right? You didn't even leave me a single message." I casually replied, "Didn't you say it yourself? To never bother you again." 5 years ago, upon receiving the news that he was marrying Bella, I rushed to the scene in panic. On the way, I had a car accident, trapped by the airbag in the driver's seat, on the brink of death. I called him, asking him to save me. But he was busy putting the veil on Bella, and the phone rang repeatedly. It was only on the last ring that it was answered. "Bella has already suffered enough as an illegitimate daughter, can't you even tolerate a wedding? Not to mention just a car accident, even if you died, don't bother me. I must marry Bella." Ryan and I met at 7, fell in love at 18, got engaged at 23. At 26, he cursed me to die just to marry my father's illegitimate daughter. At that moment, I resolved never to bother him again in this lifetime. At this moment, hearing my words, he unnaturally tugged at his mouth. "It was just a joke, you took it seriously." He straightened up and looked me up and down. "How did you know I'd come to the cemetery today? And you're wearing the green coat I like." He stared at me with a forced smile. "You don't think that after deceiving me for 5 years, by pretending to be foolish and playing hard to get, I'll turn back and like you again, do you? Let me tell you, in the years you were gone, Bella has been very good to me. Unless you truly admit your mistake and beg me, I will never." "You're overthinking it." I interrupted him impatiently. "I returned to relocate my mom's grave. Once done, I'll leave immediately. Also." I paused, stood up, and walked toward the cemetery gate. Since you're married, stop wearing our engagement ring. It's faded. Ryan was stunned in place, then strode to catch up with me. Tomorrow is your dad's 50th birthday, he misses you a lot. Remember to come early. I paused for a second, then quickened my pace to leave. I had no father as early as 5 years ago. 5 years ago, at my mother's funeral, in front of all relatives, Gregory brought his illegitimate daughter home to recognize her ancestry. I just made a small mistake that every man makes. Bella was raised outside for over 20 years, I only brought her home after your mom died, I did right by your mom. Therefore, to compensate, he allowed Bella to take my room and jewelry, letting her assume the image of an innocent sister and interfere in my relationship with Ryan. Even when I was sent to the operating room after the car accident, and the nurse notified him to sign, he said, "Today is my younger daughter's wedding day, I can't go to such an inauspicious place as the hospital." I know Claire, she's always made a fuss since childhood. Talk of fractures and heavy bleeding is all lies. Your hospital is for saving lives, don't play along with her. My daughter is calling me over, the wedding is about to start. Don't call again. Lying on the operating table, I clearly felt the sympathetic and pitying gazes of the surrounding doctors and nurses. Probably, they had never seen someone abandoned by all family members like me before. Pulling my thoughts back, I pulled down my sleeve to cover the scar on my arm and took a taxi back to the hotel. That evening, I lay on the hotel bed video chatting with my husband and child. My husband, an overseas Chinese, is very clingy, just like the child, unable to be apart from me for a day. Wife, godfather says he misses home too and is packing, he'll return to the country with us tomorrow morning. My non-blood related brother Marcus poked his head into the video. Yes, little sister, Dad and I discussed it, relocating Auntie's grave is a big matter, we must go back. Along the way, Dad and I can inspect the domestic industries again. While you're alone in the country, remember to eat well and keep warm, your knees aren't good. The car accident 5 years ago left permanent scars on my knees. Marcus, as my senior brother at the time, was the first to discover my helplessness. Over these 5 years in France, he took me home, recognized me as his sister, and had me change my identity. Godfather Richard treated me like his own daughter, spoiling me. They are my true family. I smiled and nodded, chatted a bit more, then reluctantly hung up. The feeling of being cared for by family is truly wonderful. The next day, the grave relocation proceeded smoothly without needing my attention. I took the opportunity to go to the mall to buy some daily necessities for my returning family. On the way, Ryan somehow obtained my phone number and sent me an address, Fass Hotel, one of the properties my godfather Richard was returning to inspect. I ignored him and took a taxi back to the hotel. A Maybach slowly stopped in front of me. Before I could react, I was pushed into the back seat, and the door locked with a click. "Brother?" Seeing Harry's familiar face in the driver's seat, I subconsciously called out, then immediately recalled the last call I made to him before leaving the country. 5 years ago, holding my boarding pass, I wanted to tell him I had decided to study abroad and would no longer disturb him and Bella as siblings. But as soon as the call connected, before I could speak, his angry scolding blocked me. "Claire, did your upbringing go to the dogs after Mom died? If Ryan and Dad hadn't told me, I wouldn't have known you deliberately caused a car accident to prevent Bella from being happy, trying to ruin her wedding. Do you really hate seeing Bella well? From now on, don't call me brother, I don't have a sister like you." My thoughts returned, and I immediately corrected, "Sorry, I misspoke. Mr. Harry." I emphasized, stressing it was unintentional, but Harry's face instantly darkened. "You're still so, these 5 years, have you lived so poorly?" He coldly glanced at my shopping bag and mocked lightly. "For Dad's birthday, you can't even afford a decent gift. If Ryan hadn't told me you were back, how long would you continue throwing tantrums at home? If you were half as sensible as Bella, I wouldn't." He stopped at the end. I chuckled lightly, naturally completing his unfinished sentence, "Wouldn't only care for her and not for you." This phrase, I could recite proficiently 5 years ago. Harry glanced at the rearview mirror, his expression becoming complex. Suddenly, he casually said, "There's chocolate cake in the fridge." I've loved chocolate cake since childhood, especially the ones Harry made. Before Bella moved into our home, Harry, as my brother, was the person who treated me best in the world besides Mom. I liked pink, so he bought me a wardrobe full of pink princess dresses. I liked eating chocolate cake, so he proactively asked the nanny to teach him, and every time I was unhappy, he would bring handmade chocolate cake to coax me. I once firmly believed that in this world, only he would never betray me. But at Bella and Ryan's wedding, the one leading the toast, wishing them eternal love and growing old together, was him. 5 years ago, on the drive to the wedding venue, I called to question him, why help outsiders bully me together? I could accept betrayal from anyone but him, because he was my brother. On the phone, Harry was silent for a moment, then said unequivocally, "Claire, you are my sister, and Bella is also my sister. I hope she is happy." Because of that sentence, "Bella is also my sister," I was distracted, the steering wheel veered, and I crashed into the barrier. My knee seemed to feel that piercing pain from steel again. I tightened my breath, forcing myself not to think about it, and said softly, "I stopped eating chocolate cake 5 years ago." Harry was stunned, his lips moving as if wanting to say something. I raised my head, my gaze sweeping over his hair that had turned half white at some point. "This isn't the way back to the hotel. Where are you taking me?" Harry's Adam's apple bobbed, and he said softly, "To Dad's birthday banquet." The black Maybach stopped at the hotel entrance. Reluctantly, I was dragged inside by Harry. In the center of the hall, at the main table, sat the man in a red tang suit with a genial face, my biological father, Gregory. 5 years without seeing him, he had aged and become milder. If not for the painful memories, I almost couldn't recall how he forced me to kneel in the rain all night for Bella. "Dad, I brought Claire." Harry dragged me through the crowd to Gregory, beside whom sat Ryan, but Bella was absent. "Knowing you were back today, Dad specially sent Bella on a trip." Harry seemed to read my mind and explained. "These years, he's missed you a lot." I tugged at my mouth, finding it somewhat amusing. "You're back." Gregory glanced at me and spoke calmly, like treating a child who had finished throwing a tantrum. I ignored him and calmly looked at Harry. "I've seen him, can I leave now?" My dad's plane was about to land. If they didn't see me, they'd wonder. Harry was stunned and about to speak when surrounding relatives looked over upon hearing. "Isn't Claire dead? How is she alive?" The speaker was my second aunt, who once doted on me the most among all relatives. She sighed and complained to the person beside her, "Good thing Bella didn't come, otherwise, seeing her would make her unhappy again. On such a good day, she inexplicably comes back. This child is really inconsiderate." "Who says not?" My third aunt, who used to praise me as obedient and wanted to take me home as her own daughter, rolled her eyes at me. From childhood, I felt Claire was scheming. Look, to compete for favor, she even deceives her own dad, just like her early deceased mom. They chimed in one after another. Besides lecturing, no one cared where I had been these 5 years, if I was doing well, or if I had suffered grievances. I found it utterly boring, broke free from Harry's hand, and turned to leave. "Stop." Gregory called me, his expression complex. "Claire, won't you even eat?" The way he said it, as if the person who punished me with no food for a week 5 years ago because I refused to give my room to Bella wasn't him. Ryan stood up and pulled me, acting as if for my good. "Today is our dad's birthday, you've finally come home, don't throw a tantrum." I pushed him away and coldly spat 2 words, "Sick." I walked toward the hotel door. A large hand grabbed my long hair, followed by a slap to my face. The person who hit me used full force. My head was knocked to the side, my scalp and left cheek burning with pain, and the corner of my mouth split. My uncle, who once carried me on his back for piggyback rides, released his hand and angrily scolded me. "You little brat, how dare you speak like that? Do you know your dad has been hospitalized several times from anger over your matters? Kneel down, kowtow to your dad, and apologize properly. At such a young age, how can you have such a temper?" 5 years ago, at my mother's funeral. Gregory brought in Bella, who was only a year younger than me, and grandly announced in front of my mother's memorial hall. Bella was his younger daughter raised outside, and he wanted her to recognize her ancestry. My eyes reddened with anger, and like a madwoman, I tore at them, telling them to get out and not dirty my mom's eyes in front of her spirit. Second aunt hugged me tightly, scolding me for being inconsiderate. How nice to have an extra sister. Third aunt comforted the frightened Bella, saying I was mentally ill and telling her not to mind me. Uncle patted Gregory's shoulder, saying earnestly, I told you long ago, girls can't be spoiled, look at what Claire has become. Disgraceful. The past flashed before my eyes again. I shook my head, the nauseating feeling spreading, making me very uncomfortable. If I'm uncomfortable, they shouldn't be comfortable either. I lowered the hand covering my face, grabbed a wine bottle from the table, and smashed it hard at their feet. I'll say it one last time, my name is Claire, not Claire, and I have nothing to do with you. Uncle angrily pointed at me, Gregory, this is your fine daughter. Daring to defy elders. Throw her out for me. This family doesn't welcome her. Gregory stopped him, big brother, don't be angry, after all, she's my biological daughter, Harry's sister. The child is inconsiderate, I'll teach her properly later. Harry blocked in front of me, frustrated, Claire, can't you be a bit more obedient? Ryan also leaned over, anxious, I told you not to throw a tantrum, these are all elders, why is your temper still so stubborn? Like this, you go out first, I'll call Bella back, and once she coaxes these elders, you can. Before he finished, the hotel hall door was pushed open. My husband and brother Marcus escorted Godfather in. This is my family's hotel, I'd like to see who dares to drive my daughter away. As my tearful dad rang out, the air in the entire room seemed to freeze. Richard's appearance brought an inexplicable authority. His sharp gaze swept over every relative in the room, the lively clamor abruptly stopping, even Gregory's originally flushed face showing a trace of surprise. The relatives who were just chattering away instantly changed their expressions, the contempt and sarcasm in their eyes vanishing without a trace. They exchanged glances. No one expected me to have a godfather of such status. Second aunt muttered softly, this is Richard, the famous boss of the Chun group in the city center. When did this dead girl Claire climb such a connection? Third aunt tugged at uncle's sleeve, lowering her voice, my God, look at Richard's gaze, it's like he won't tolerate anyone bullying his goddaughter even a bit. You just slapped that girl, who knows how they'll hold a grudge against you. Seeing this, uncle immediately became incoherent, I. But the deed was done, no matter how much he regretted now, it was useless. Yes, I had long made it clear to them, now my name is Claire, I have people who care for me, friends, and I've built my own family. I'm no longer the Claire they could bully at will. That name was once like a label stuck on me, reminding me that I was a pitiful person abandoned by family and lover. But now, everything is different. 3 years ago, when I was abandoned by the whole world, had the car accident, and lay alone on the operating table, I decided to cut off all ties with everyone from the past. Gregory and Harry are just dispensable shadows in my heart. When I was on the brink of death in the operating room, my brother was reciting vows at my fiancé and sister's wedding, and my father was officiating for them. From then on, I no longer held hope for the Gu family. Therefore, after recovering, I left this heartbreaking place alone and went abroad. When I first arrived abroad, due to language barriers and lack of money, I suffered a lot. One winter, I was even evicted by the landlord and ended up on the streets. But just when I felt I couldn't go on, I met Marcus, who later became my brother. He stood before me like an angel and asked, Miss, are you in trouble? The familiar language flowed into my heart like a warm current, and I burst into tears right then. Later, he took me home, gave me a place to live and a new job. Gradually, with his help, I rediscovered myself and met someone I liked again, my current husband, Ethan. So, they weren't wrong, the past Claire had long died, now I am Claire, with no relation to the Gu family. Richard slowly walked to my side, comfortingly patting my shoulder lightly. Claire, didn't you say you were going shopping? Why so long without returning? Did some blind fool bully you? Before he finished, Marcus, also in a suit, strode in, directly facing the relatives with a calm tone laced with warning. Everyone, Claire is my sister. If there's any conflict with you, come at me. A few words, yet carrying an oppressive deterrence. At that moment, my husband Ethan slowly approached from the back of the crowd, holding our lively and adorable son Leo's hand. Upon seeing me, Leo immediately broke free from his dad's hand into my arms, and said in a childish voice, "Mommy, what's wrong with your face?" At these words, Gregory and Harry were stunned. Gregory reacted first, staring at me. "Claire, when did you get married? Without a word, do you still have me as a father in your eyes?" I ignored the angry Gregory and turned my head aside. Only then did everyone notice the red palm print on my cheek, hidden by my draped hair. It was the mark from Uncle's furious slap earlier. I stroked the child's soft hair, unwilling to let him see this scene. But Godfather immediately got angry. These years in the Ching family, I was pampered, the family treated me well, and many grievances I suffered in the Gu family, the hidden habits were re-nurtured back. Richard found it hard to accept. His cherished daughter had only returned for 2 days and suffered such treatment. "Who did it?" Richard asked. The room was silent. "Who hit her?" "I don't want to ask twice, unless someone doesn't want to survive in this city." Uncle's hand trembled, picking up the teacup then putting it down. Second aunt opened her mouth but made no sound. Third aunt lowered her head, pretending to adjust her clothes. But about 30 seconds later, she said with difficulty, "Big brother, just admit it, don't implicate us. The Ching family's power is well known, second and third aunt's families are in business, no one wants to offend the person before them." The elders who were ganging up to point fingers at me earlier now fled for themselves in the face of disaster. "It was you?" Richard glanced at Uncle. Uncle's hand shook even more. But he still felt he couldn't lose face. Steadying himself barely, he said stubbornly, "Misunderstanding, just a misunderstanding. We're all relatives, I was just trying to educate this inconsiderate child Claire, don't take offense, Richard." Hearing this, good brother Marcus sneered and asked, "Since when does our Ching family's child need an outsider like you to educate?" His words clearly showed he didn't want to claim kinship with Uncle. Uncle, knowing flattery was useless now, suddenly changed his expression and pointed at me, cursing, "Don't think climbing a high branch after fooling around outside for a few days makes you lawless. So what if I hit you? Disciplining a little girl like you is only right and proper. Your behavior is just like your mom's, unreasonable. Next time I see you, it won't be just a slap." Brother knew Mom's importance in my heart. Hearing his words, his face darkened. He took out his phone, dialed a number, and said a few words. Soon, the manager appeared with a team of security guards. "Richard, sorry for our oversight, who is causing trouble?" Marcus pointed at Uncle, and the manager, understanding, had security rack him up and drag him out. Second and third aunts wanted to plead with me but were silenced by Marcus's glare and dared not say more. As security roughly dragged Uncle out of the hotel, his curses echoed in the hall. I didn't look back, but the burning pain on my face still reminded me of that slap's weight. Marcus strode over, gently touched my cheek, his expression grim. "Claire, rest for a bit, I'll handle the rest." Saying that, he dialed the company's phone. "All personnel in the legal department, drop all current work and immediately initiate litigation procedures for Stephen's assault." Gregory and Harry then rushed over as if waking from a dream. Gregory tremblingly grabbed my arm. "Claire, he's your own uncle." I coldly shook off his hand. "My surname is Ching, his is Gu, how could he be my uncle?" Harry, anxious with sweat on his forehead, "Just give brother some face, let this go, okay?" Looking at their anxious appearances, I suddenly laughed out loud. "Face? What face do you have? Do you remember the night Bella came home, when I had a fever of 39 degrees, where were you?" "Celebrating Bella's birthday. I lay in the hospital on 4, with no one by my side. Back then, when I had the car accident and almost didn't survive, you were holding Bella's wedding. Did you ever think I was also your sister?" I turned to Gregory again, trembling as I questioned him. "Your daughter?" Gregory's face paled. "Those are all past matters. past matters? I smiled wearily and approached him. Fine, treat them as past, I won't mention them. But just now? When this group of relatives accused me and insulted my mom under your banner, did you ever think to speak up for me? When Stephen hit me, did you think to stop him? Or is it that everything they did had your tacit approval? Harry tried to interrupt. Claire, those are. What are they? My voice was cold as ice. My mom's body wasn't even cold, and you brought Bella home. She wore my clothes, used my cosmetics. Did any of you say no? Father staggered back, lips trembling. If your mother knew you like this now. Don't mention my mom. I sharply interrupted him. You don't deserve to. Also, my name is Claire. Claire died long ago. You personally erected her tombstone. How could you forget? At this time, Richard came out from the side. He walked straight to me, scanning the ashen-faced father and son. Mr. Harry, I think it's necessary to remind you. Richard's voice was calm yet carried undeniable authority. Claire is now my daughter. Since her mother's death, I provided for her education, gave her work, cared for her life, and Marcus and I accompanied her on every birthday. Legally and morally, she has only one father, me, and one brother, Marcus. Hearing these words, my heart suddenly filled with immense courage and confidence. This time, I no longer feared being abandoned. After handling this mess, we were about to leave. Unexpectedly, Bella arrived then, walking into the private room with a beaming smile. The diamond necklace around her neck was the one she snatched from my cabinet the year I left. Now on her, it looked tailor-made. Ryan's gaze was evasive, but he still cooperatively held her waist. Sister, what a coincidence. Bella's voice was sickeningly sweet. Heard you were back. Ryan and I were very worried about you. I ignored her, lowering my head to adjust Leo's collar. What coincidence in meeting at Gregory's birthday banquet. Mommy, why is that auntie glaring at you? Leo whispered in my ear. Ethan beside naturally took Leo into his arms. Daddy. Leo happily hugged his neck. Bella's smile froze on her face. She stared fixedly at Ethan, her fingers unconsciously tightening, not even noticing Ryan wincing in pain. No wonder her reaction, although Ethan has been abroad with me these years, as the head of the Overseas Lynn Group. He is an object many in this city want to attach to, but he's always low-key. I didn't expect Bella to know him. But it's normal. Bella, who has always longed to marry into wealth, knows the backgrounds of most aristocratic sons like the back of her hand, otherwise, she wouldn't have insisted on snatching Ryan from me. This is? Ryan hesitantly asked, his gaze moving back and forth between me and Ethan. My husband, Ethan. I smiled slightly in response. Ryan's face immediately turned ugly. Didn't expect sister to marry so quickly. Bella finally regained her voice, jealousy almost overflowing in her tone, and had such a big child. Speaking of it, sister's moves are really fast, just a few short years, married and had a child. But weren't you deeply in love with Ryan? I thought you'd marry no one but him. Couldn't this child also? She deliberately dragged out the ending, the implication couldn't be clearer. Ryan's gaze became probing, constantly examining Leo's features. Bella, what do you mean by that? I asked. Bella smiled sweetly, innocently, no meaning at all, just a friendly reminder to Mr. Lynn. Sister, your skills in seducing men are even better than before. Ethan's gaze cooled. Miss Bella seems very interested in my wife's past. Coincidentally, I'd also like to know how Miss Bella's mother seduced Gregory back then. Why not lay it all out? Bella's face instantly turned pale. I had no mood to continue entangling with them, turning back to Richard and Marcus. Dad, brother, let's go back. Just as I spoke, Bella's voice suddenly became shrill. Claire, what madness are you on? Who are you calling Dad? This seems to have nothing to do with you, right? Ryan suddenly stood up, looking at me with complex eyes. Claire, so in the years you were missing, you've been with the Ching family? Does this concern you? Ethan interrupted him, his arm naturally around my shoulders. Bella bit her lip hard, her finely made-up face twisted in anger. She suddenly pointed at Leo. even if you're connected to the Ching family, so what? This bastard isn't Lin family blood at all. Ethan, you've been deceived by this woman. Leah was frightened, shrinking in Ethan's arms and sobbing softly. Ethan gently patted the child's back, his voice cold as ice. Miss Bella, slander carries legal responsibility. Do I need to have my lawyer send you a copy of the paternity test report? Ryan suddenly grabbed Bella's wrist. Enough. Let's go. Let go. Bella shook him off, pointing her finger at me. Claire, on what basis? Why do you always steal my limelight? Take what's mine. Why did you have to appear? Why? I quietly watched her hysterical appearance, feeling pity for her for the first time. She snatched my toys, clothes, even boyfriend, thinking that proved she was stronger than me. But she would never understand, what truly belongs to you, others can't take away. I didn't want to say more to her, pulled Ethan, and left. After returning home, Dad and brother took turns advising me not to take these matters to heart. If the Gu family came looking again, they'd handle it. I nodded in agreement and didn't pay much more attention. But Gregory and Harry, like madmen, kept calling and harassing me, trying to morally kidnap me with father-daughter and sibling bonds to make me go back with them. I knew they did all this just to climb a connection with the Ching family for their own interests, not truly for me. That afternoon, I was sitting on the sofa watching TV when my phone suddenly vibrated. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. I hesitated for a moment, but ultimately pressed answer. Claire, Dad's hospitalized. Harry's anxious voice came from the other end. The doctor says the situation isn't optimistic. Can you come back to see? I held the phone, silent for a moment, recalling these years' grievances. I'm very busy. I replied flatly, preparing to hang up. Wait. Harry hurriedly shouted, Actually, it's Bella who's in trouble. She slit her wrists in suicide, now in rescue at the hospital. The doctor says blood transfusion is needed, but the blood bank is short. Your blood type is the same as hers, both Rh negative, can you? I've long heard of Bella's tantrums at home, crying, making scenes, threatening suicide, because she didn't want them to bring me back. I just didn't know she could actually herself into the hospital. I sneered, Can I? What do you think? Just as I was about to hang up, a voice beside inserted, Go, Claire, I'll accompany you. It was Marcus. His voice always calmed me. Treat it as making a clean break. Although I didn't understand why brother supported me continuing contact with the Gu family, I still followed his advice and agreed to Harry. The next day, Marcus personally drove me to the hospital. Upon arrival, Gregory and Harry were already waiting at the emergency room door. Claire, you've finally come. Gregory quickly stepped forward, smiling. Dad knows he wasn't good enough to you before. This time you coming to save your sister. Dad is truly touched. Harry echoed beside, Yes, sister, the blood bank is short on blood. Bella's situation is very dangerous now. Take me to donate blood. I said calmly. It wasn't until Marcus took me to the blood testing room that I finally understood his insistence on me coming here today. After a long hour of waiting, when the doctor came out with the test report, everyone's gazes focused on him. Miss Bella and Miss Claire's blood types match, but, the doctor pushed his glasses and continued, during the DNA kinship identification, we discovered a problem. Gregory stood up abruptly, What problem? The doctor looked at the report, then at us. According to the test, there is no blood relation between Claire and Bella. Moreover, Bella has no biological father-daughter relationship with Mr. Gregory. The entire corridor instantly quieted. Gregory's face turned from red to white, lips trembling. This is impossible. This is a scientific test result. The doctor handed the report to Gregory. There is no mistake. Gregory staggered back 2 steps, holding the wall. Harry quickly supported him, his face full of disbelief. Watching this scene, my heart was filled with mixed emotions. For so many years, Gregory doted on Bella in every way, even neglecting me, his biological daughter, because of her arrival. Who would have thought that his treasured illegitimate daughter wasn't his child at all? Marcus walked to my side and patted my shoulder. At the moment the truth was revealed, I felt no pleasure, only deep sorrow, for my mom, for this shattered family, and for Bella acting in the hospital. Marcus had known Bella's background as early as when he brought me home. He originally didn't want to go to extremes, but that day Bella provoked at the hotel and dared say Leo wasn't Ethan's child. His true purpose in insisting on accompanying me today was to expose this lie in front of everyone, allowing me to completely escape the Gu family's moral kidnapping. That day, leaving the hospital, Gregory still sat dazed on the bench, tightly clutching the test report. Harry wanted to chase and explain something, but I didn't look back. Sitting in Marcus's car, watching the street scenes recede rapidly outside the window, I suddenly felt an unprecedented lightness. That family that troubled me for years, those 3 family members worse than strangers, had finally become the eternal past. Not long after returning home, I heard the Gu family erupted in intense arguments. Everyone in the circle knew Gregory had been cuckolded by Bella's mom, and had raised Bella, this bastard, as a treasure for so many years. Everyone was laughing at him. Unable to bear it, Gregory drove Bella out of the house, and Harry, who had always doted on her, had no objections. Moreover, Bella was not only driven out but also abandoned by Ryan, left homeless. Initially, Ryan married her because he saw she was more favored by father, thinking alliance with her was more valuable than with me. Now, with benefits exhausted, their separation was reasonable. But business is like a battlefield. After the Gu and he family's interest alliance collapsed, rivals who had been watching soon discovered and pursued to break them. Now, the Gu family is completely bankrupt, and the He family is also in peril. The Gu family's villa was used to pay debts. Gregory and Harry squeezed into a small rental in the urban village, reaping what they sowed. Heard those relatives who gathered around them before, none visited them, pitiful. But all this has nothing to do with me anymore. After handling this mess in the country, I'll emigrate with Ethan. We agreed to return once a year to sweep Mom's grave. Everything about the Gu family, for my new life, is just a very small interlude. I don't care at all. My work abroad is thriving, life is flourishing, being with the person I like and family who love me, every day is happy. If time could rewind, the 26-year-old Claire would still unhesitatingly rush toward a future that is solely her own.